you everyone for joining us this afternoon for yet another Summer in Transition series webinar. Just to kick off, just as a reminder or a note for those who haven't joined us this summer or have, that this particular webinar is being recorded. So anyone that isn't able to join us, or even those of you that are here with us live, you're going to get a lot of great information today. So if you need to rewatch it, this webinar is going to be live and it's going to be uploaded within the next 72 hours or so, once we can make this webinar accessible for all to view at a later time. So again, thank you for joining us. My name is Shamice Spinks. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Assistant Director here in New Student and Family Programs. And so before I pass it off to my amazing colleagues and panelists to get us started with our webinar today about housing policies and the Duke Community Standards, just some quick housekeeping rules about this Zoom webinar. And again, if you've been here with us throughout the entire summer, you've heard these before, but doesn't hurt to reiterate again. So again, this webinar is recorded. The Q&A function is where you would input your questions. The chat box has been disabled. So any questions that you have throughout this session, try and wait to have those questions inputted until the end, because I am pretty sure, again, with our colleagues here today, that they will pretty much answer your question in their presentation. So try and wait to hold off until the end. And then again, also, not only is the chat box disabled, but also the raise hand feature. And so some of the questions that you put into the Q&A will be either answered in that box function or it will be answered live. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to our amazing panelists so they can introduce themselves and get this presentation started.
Hey, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning from wherever it is that you are logging in from. I am Latasha Williams. I am one of the Associate Dean of Students on campus, and I serve as the Director for the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards here at Duke University. And I am excited to talk with each of you as incoming students at Duke in preparation for fall semester. It's great to be able to connect with you all. And I have my colleague here with me, will allow himself to introduce himself, and then we'll move on with the presentation.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. I am Brandon Howard. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am one of the associate deans for Housing and Residence Life, and specifically, I will be your campus dean for East Campus when you arrive here at Duke in a few short weeks. So we're going to go ahead and just launch into our session today, a little bit about housing policies and our Duke community standards. So we're going to start off a little bit with talking a little bit about our offices, what we do, as well as talk about sort of what our policies are in a very broad stroke. And then we're going to go into Duke community standards and some of the important policies and community standards that you're going to want to know as you get ready to join us here at Duke. I do like to give everyone a heads up that this won't be all inclusive. So we won't go over every single policy and procedure that you'll be responsible for once you arrive here. But what we will give you is the information to find out the other policies that may not necessarily come up as often, but we want to make sure that we're going to give you the access to the information as well, and you'll receive that information as you move here to campus. Then we'll talk a little bit about what actually happens if you violate a policy, and many of you on the screen won't have to worry about that, but if you happen to, we'll talk a little bit about that. The undergraduate reporting policy, and then some tips some tips for you all to think about as you think about how to stay safe on campus. So I'm going to kick us off with talking a little bit about what is housing and residence life and some of our housing policies. So overall, housing and residence life, my team and my colleagues, we really do manage your residential and your on-campus living experience for the halls. One of our primary goal is to make sure that you are in in a residential environment that is clean, that is healthy, but it's also safe and it's welcoming and it's inclusive for everybody, right? As a part of that, our big role is to really build and maintain a safe and comfortable community. And that involves a myriad of different staff members, from your resident assistants, who some of you have met through your welcome to your house meetings, to your residence coordinators, PAs, and then folks like myself. As a part of building that community, residential community for you all that makes sure that everyone is as comfortable and as safe as possible, there are certain things that we do with that, including providing some social opportunities through programming, networking, intellectual engagement opportunities for you to engage with your faculty and residents and other faculty and academic partners on campus. We're going to connect you with each other through a lot of our community interaction activities. We're going to make sure that everything is safe and comfortable. We're going to provide you all resources. But one of the things that is sometimes not very popular among students, but is very important, are part of our role in the residence halls to address behaviors that do detract from the community by enforcing our community standards. When our community standards or housing policies are violated, or when people don't adhere to those, it does create an impact not only for you, but for the individuals around you. And so a part of our protecting and maintaining a community is addressing some of those behaviors that detract from community. And then overall, our housing policies are those that are outlined online and in your housing license. And these are the rules and policies that you agreed to as a condition to living on campus, which is required for students through the first 3 years at Duke. Many of our housing policies, not all, if not all of them, are also a part of the Duke community standard. So my colleague and friend Latasha and I, we work very closely together because a lot of the housing policies also intersect with the work that Latasha and her team does in the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards.
So what is OSCCS in the Duke Community Standard? You'll hear these names and acronyms repeatedly throughout your time at Duke. And so OSCCS stands for the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards. And our office really exists on campus to help strengthen personal responsibility and accountability when we investigate and resolve alleged violations of university policies. And so what that really means is our office exists to encourage each of you to make responsible decisions as it relates to university policies, whether that's in the residence halls, whether that is in Durham on 9th Street, as you're living your college experience. There is a standard of expectation that we have for Duke students and Duke community members. And basically what happens often is if there are decisions that are made that result in a possible violation of the Duke community standard, which is our larger set of expectations for all Duke community members. If there is an alleged violation of that, typically a report is filed and sent to our office to review. When reports are filed, it's important to note that our office is presuming that every individual that's named in a report is not responsible, is innocent, until we've had the opportunity to meet with you to get your side of the story, or until you accept responsibility and say, yes, I did the thing. We are going to presume that you are innocent, but we do have an obligation to follow up when we find out that there has been an alleged violation of our policy. And one thing that I just want to emphasize is that the Duke Community Standard is a community-based standard, which means that your resident assistants, your residential coordinator, the assistant deans and associate deans on campus, faculty members in the classroom, we are all a part of this big community that's upholding a standard of integrity and character as Duke University students or Duke University administrators and staff. And so we just want to encourage you to think of the Duke Community Standard as something that you have ownership and responsibility over, and as a reminder of the standards and expectations that the Duke community has for you as a member of this community. So why does the Duke Community Standard exist? Why do these sets of expectations exist? And these expectations exist to help guide you with decision-making. I can tell you as a college student, based on my own college experience and based on my experience working in conduct, that you are going to be faced with some pretty tough decisions with a fair amount of peer pressure to engage in a very active and lively social environment. And our community standard really exists to help you make the best decision given our expectations for this community and even outside of this community. When you're in Durham, shopping at the mall, engaging in the wonderful activities and opportunities that are afforded to you through being a part of this community. We really expect the Duke Community Standard to help guide you on what is and is not permissible and appropriate. Another reason why the Duke Community Standard exists, it is really to create a climate on our campus that is safe, where we expect each other to be honest and fair in our dealings with each other, where we expect each other to be respectful. In this diverse community, you will learn that there are folks from different backgrounds and different walks of life, and respect amongst all of those differences is a part of our standard. And the other thing that we say that we expect for students is some level of accountability. That if you made a decision to engage in concerning behavior or make a policy violation, we expect you to be accountable and ask the question of, what do I need to do to repair the harm that I might have caused in this community and rebuild trust as a member of this Duke community. And so we want you to see these bolded words as values that we expect in our Duke Community Standard. The last thing that our Duke Community Standard exists for is really to create a sense of belonging, and as I mentioned earlier, shared ownership and responsibility for the community we share. So our community here at Duke and on Duke's campus is only as safe as we make it, because we make up the individual parts of our community. And so if you are, or your friend or neighbor, maybe not you, but your friend or neighbor is engaging in behavior that jeopardizes the safety of our community, we expect that you all amongst yourselves, amongst your colleagues and peers, will begin to challenge your colleagues and peers to uphold that Duke Community Standard, that the floor that you live on in your residence hall in your residential community is going to be safer because you see it as a part of your responsibility as a member in that community to make sure the standards of living, the Duke Community Standard, is upheld. And so we really want you to develop an affinity for being a Duke student and being in our Duke residence halls and on our campus. And that with that affinity comes a lot of privileges, and there also comes a lot of responsibilities for keeping this community safe and productive and conducive for learning, and also a fun social environment, again, that is still safe. So we'll take some time to go over some important policies, whether they're residence life policies and community standards. So on this screen, and is this one that I'm covering, Brandon, or is this, okay. On this screen is a list of some of the more prevalent policy violations that we typically see on Duke's campus as it relates to the Office of Student Conduct receiving reports. And as you might imagine, surprise, surprise, alcohol consumption sometimes happens on our college campus, which is really something that we know occurs on every college campus, right? And so there are policies that are in place, and we'll talk about them a little bit more, that basically state that folks who are under 21 should not be consuming any alcohol, and whether or not you possess it or purchase it or consume it, all of those behaviors for persons under 21 are prohibited. And being under the influence of any amount of alcohol is also prohibited. So perhaps you don't have it on you, you don't have that can of White Claw or Natty Light on you in your possession. But if you were drinking it at any point and you were intoxicated or under the influence of it, and our staff become aware of it, that can still be a violation of our policy. So we just want to make sure that that's clear for you all. Brandon, I don't know if you wanted to chime in specifically about any guidance for East Campus.
Yeah. So I think it's also important for everyone to know that East Campus is a dry campus. And so while rare, there may be some of you out in the crowd, on a virtual crowd, that are 21 years of age or older, right? Because, you know, there's sometimes non-traditional students join us here at Duke. So regardless of how old you are, East Campus is a dry campus. That means that alcoholic beverages are prohibited on East. If our team or our residence life team encounters or observes alcohol in your residence hall space, even if you weren't consuming it, that would still constitute a policy violation as well.
Mm-hmm. And another reminder, Brandon, as you mentioned alcohol in your residential space, whether or not you consumed it or whether or not you yourself brought it or a guest brought it, can still result in implications for you and your conduct on Duke's campus. So please make sure that you're doing your best to make sure that your space in your area is in compliance with housing policies and with Duke's policy. There's some unsafe and irresponsible behavior that often occurs in college environments. Over consuming alcohol, which is basically consuming alcohol in excessive quantities in a short amount of time. That's something that we consider unsafe. And so one thing I like to talk about here is, if you're going to party responsibly. And so what does partying responsibly mean? It means making sure you're aware of policies and following those policies. If you're underage, that you're not drinking alcohol until you are of legal age. And if you are making decisions that you, despite the legal requirements for drinking, are going to engage in alcohol, that you're doing so responsibly. So making that commitment at the beginning of the night, I am only going to drink what is accessible to me as a person that's 18, 19, whatever. So if that means juice, if that means soda, if that means mocktails, whatever that is for you, make that commitment. Because we do have research that says when students and young folk make a commitment about what they are going to do and what they are not going to do, when students create those boundaries, they are more likely to stick to those boundaries in social environments. So before you go out, before you pregame, make a commitment about what you will and will not engage in for that night. I wanted to take a moment too to talk about academic dishonesty, because a lot of students correlate the conduct office with behaviors like alcohol, being loud in the residence hall. But there is a portion of the conduct office that deals specifically with your behavior and decisions in the classroom. And that is related to the coursework that you submit, the assignments you submit, the exams that you take. And students who make poor decisions when they are completing their coursework, completing their exams, writing papers, they can be charged, or they can be alleged to have violated any three of these academic dishonesty policies, whether it's lying, communicating untruths, or misrepresenting academic work, if it's cheating, wrongfully using or attempting to use unauthorized materials, information, study aids, or the ideas or work of another, or plagiarism, which is something that happens a lot on campus, occurs when a student has an intention to deceive or disregard proper scholarly procedures and presents information, ideas, or phrasing of another as if it were your own. So taking someone else's work, whether it's your neighbor's work, or typing in ChatGPT a particular topic, and then taking the ChatGPT output and submitting it as your own words in your own work. That is considered plagiarism on Duke's campus. And so we want you to think thoughtfully now and make a commitment now to be honest and integral in your assignment submission. And that can be a challenge when you are in a highly academic environment like Duke. There are pressures, especially coming from high school, once you get here, to perform and to be excellent in all of your work assignments. And sometimes that pressure results in poor decision-making as it relates to cheating and plagiarizing. And we want to encourage you all to do what you can so that that pressure does not overwhelm you and influence you making those poor decisions related to cheating and plagiarism. So take your time to study. Make sure that you're managing your time so that you aren't rushing at the last minute and feeling pressure to perform in that regard. Meet with your professors early and often on work that is difficult so that you can get a good understanding and comprehension of that work and good mastery over that topic area so that you feel comfortable in the quality of work and assignment that you're submitting. There's different strategies that you can use to avoid academic dishonesty. Time management is huge. And then taking the time to make sure you fully understand course material so that you aren't pressured to seek other sources. So you can learn more about our academic dishonesty and our policies using this QR code.
And the one thing I would add is that I often tell some of my academic advisees may be also on this webinar, but what I tell students often is you have all worked extremely hard to get into Duke and make good grades, have the internships and the experience. And so one of the things is that do not jeopardize your time here at Duke by engaging in academic dishonesty. And we have a wealth of resources from your academic advisors to the Academic Resource Center, your professors, faculty, even student affairs staff. So before you start thinking about maybe I can cheat, plagiarize, or that kind of stuff, please reach out to these different resources so that way you don't have to take this step because you've worked hard to earn your spot here at Duke. We want you to be able to keep it.
Great point, Brandon. Thank you. So we briefly wanted to take some time to talk about what happens when a student is allegedly reported for academic misconduct. If a student does not have any prior reports of academic misconduct or non-academic misconduct, students actually get a freebie. I like to call it a freebie, but what it is, it's an alternate resolution process that isn't as formal as going through the conduct office. So in the conduct office, we might receive a report about academic dishonesty, and it can either go through a formal conduct process or it can go to an alternative process. And that alternative process for us is called a faculty student resolution. And a faculty student resolution is an optional resolution process to resolve academic dishonesty for undergraduate students. The key for faculty-student resolution is that there can be no prior record of academic dishonesty offenses. And the other key is that the faculty and the student have to agree that this is the process that they want to take. So the faculty gets to decide whether or not they want to take this route for a student, and the student has to agree to do whatever it is the faculty are asking. An FSR, or a faculty student resolution, can result in a reduced grade on an assignment, a reduced grade in the course, additional assignments, or other educational initiatives. For example, you may be referred to the Academic Resource Center to talk about study habits, avoiding plagiarism, so on and so forth. And so with the faculty student resolution process, you may need to do something to learn more about academic integrity as a result of the FSR process. And again, the FSR process is something that you have to agree to do and the faculty have to agree to do. The faculty would then share back with the Office of Student Conduct what you all agreed on. And the faculty student resolution is actually not going to be reported on your conduct history. And that's the big advantage of using this alternative resolution option rather than the conduct option. So it won't be reported in your conduct history unless you continue to engage in academic dishonesty in the future. And that is when we would report academic dishonesty cases. So we just wanted to give you an overview that this is available to you for that freebie, that first time that you might have made a mistake. If the faculty is willing to do this process and you are willing to do this process, this could be a possible resolution option for you.
So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about our cannabis and other illegal drug policy. So I know that there are some states out in the country where cannabis is legalized. North Carolina is not one of those states. And even if it were, because it's not legalized federally, we would still not permit cannabis, mainly because we receive federal aid dollars. So for you all to know, cannabis and other illegal drugs are not permitted in the residence halls or on Duke campus. So what that pretty much means is you can't consume it, manufacture it, distribute it, sell it, possess it, be under the influence of cannabis or other illegal drugs. That even means if you go to like Michigan or Colorado and you purchase cannabis there, you can't bring it back with you to North Carolina into the residence halls, because again, it's not permitted in our halls. It's not legalized in North Carolina. That also includes drug paraphernalia. So anything like bongs, grinders, pipes, those kind of things, those are also prohibited in the residence halls and on campus. Illegal drugs as well. One of the things I also add to this section is that it is also against Duke Community Standard and housing policy to utilize or distribute prescription drugs in ways that aren't intended by your prescribing physician. So if you are prescribed things, for example, Adderall for your ADHD, if you have that, you can't then use that to give to your friends or use more than what is prescribed. So if we find that there's prescription medication in the room, but the name on the bottle doesn't match any of the students that live in that room, that's going to warrant a follow-up conversation, right? So just keep that in mind. But this doesn't mean things like, oh, my friend needs a Tylenol and I gave them a Tylenol. We don't want you to assume that you can't do that, which is why we want to make sure that it's very clear that it's cannabis, other illegal drugs, or prescription drugs that are used in any other way other than intended by your physician. Another big thing that tends to pop up in the residence halls is about fire safety and smoking. So first off, candles and other open flames are not permitted in the residence halls, right? So if you're a chem major, don't bring your Bunsen burner and you do chemical experiments in your room. But candles tend to be one of the biggest policy violations that we have in the residence halls. even candles that are not lit. So you can't have candles whatsoever lit or unlit in your space, because oftentimes we find that when a student has even an unlit candle in the room, there's the intent to actually light it at some point or another. We also have certain appliances that are prohibited because they are heightened fire hazards. And so your residence coordinator may have already sent that list of prohibited items out, but we'll go over those towards the end of the presentation. If you ever have questions, please reach out to your RC. They'll be able to go over what appliances are heightened fire hazards. But these typically are those appliances that have some open heating unit, such as portable cooktops, for example, in your space. Another big thing that you want to remember is that it is expressly against North Carolina Fire Code and University Duke Community Standards and housing policy to tamper with smoke detectors or fire extinguishers. What that means is not taking the batteries out of it, not covering it with plastic bags, not hanging things from the sprinklers or the smoke detectors. That also means not using the fire extinguishers unless there is a fire, right? So sometimes, in my career, I've seen scenarios where students are, we're just gonna play jetpack and we're gonna sit in a rolling chair and use the fire extinguisher to shoot ourselves down the hall. Don't do those kind of things. It's important to know that we take fire safety very seriously, right? Because when our fire safety equipment is tampered with or in jeopardy or jeopardized, it not only impacts your safety, but it impacts the safety of everybody that lives and works in that building. So tampering with safety equipment will most likely result in you losing your housing license and being required to move off campus, in addition to other accountability measures that are determined by either Housing and Residence Life or the Office of Student Conduct. Just as a reminder that all students also must exit the building if the alarm sounds. We do have fire drills, but never assume that when an alarm goes off, never assume that it is a fire drill. Again, this is for your safety, because you never know that one alarm that happens, you never know if that's a drill, a malfunction, or if it's an actual fire. So make sure that you are all exiting the building anytime you hear the fire alarm go off. Your RAs will go over sort of what that meeting location looks like for your specific community once you arrive here to campus. And then just as a friendly FYI, Duke University is a smoke-free campus. That means not smoking inside the residence halls. That includes cigarettes. But also that means not smoking outside on Duke University property as well. If you do smoke cigarettes or cigars or other legal substances, you do have to go off campus to a public sidewalk or another venue off campus as well. So just keep that in mind. Let's talk a little bit about our guest policy. We often don't refer this to the Office of Student Conduct, but it is a policy that when people violate it, it creates a lot of conflict and discord with your roommate. Keep in mind that students can only have guests for up to 3 consecutive nights in a row. So that means that no moving your friends or your partner into your room with you and your roommate, right? Only 3 consecutive nights in a row. You must communicate overnight guests with your roommate, making sure that your roommate is in agreement, they are comfortable. You and your roommate should have that mutual respect to sort of say, hey, I'm having my partner stay over for a couple nights. Is that okay? That's just to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, but also feels safe in that space at the same time. Towards the beginning of the year, we'll have your RAs will work with you to complete a roommate agreement with your roommate. One of those pieces of that roommate agreement is this guest policy and how you will want to or should communicate with your roommate when you want to have overnight guests. And then as Latasha mentioned earlier, you are responsible for your guest behavior while they are visiting, right? So that means that even if you are doing nothing wrong, if your guest vandalizes the halls, if they are consuming alcohol, they bring cannabis, or they violate any of the university community standards, you will bear some level of responsibility for that, regardless if it's a non-Duke affiliated student. So as you think about, hey, who are the friends you're going to have visit from out of town, and you're thinking about all those other friends and guests, be very mindful of who you allow into the residence halls and who do you allow to bring in your space. If you know your friend is reckless and you know you can't control them, that might not be the friend you want to invite to stay with you a couple of nights on campus, because if they act up and there's a policy violation, you will be held responsible for your guest actions as well.
So the next couple of slides are going to be talking about some very important policies that can possibly have a very deep and lasting impact to the safety and well-being of our community. And so we want to take some time to quickly define some of these policies for you all, and let you know that behaviors that fall under these policies are going to be responded to by Duke University administration. And so the first topic is the topic of hazing. Hazing is defined as any action taken or situation created, whether on or off university premises, that is harmful or potentially harmful to an individual's physical, emotional, or psychological well-being, regardless of an individual's willingness to participate or its bearing on the individual's membership status. And in college environments, a lot of times we see allegations of hazing where there are a group of students that are seeking membership in some other group of students, whether that is a fraternity, whether that it's a sorority, whether it's a cappella group or moot court or any club sport. Hazing can occur anywhere. And so we want to be very clear that if there are certain activities that could be harmful, even if we believe they aren't harmful, if they could be harmful, whether it's someone's physical well-being, emotional or psychological, anything that could be harmful in that regard could be considered hazing. And so we let you all know about this definition, number one, so that you can recognize it if it's happening to you, but also if you become a member of a group and are acting in ways that might be defined in hazing, we want you to know that the university does take serious any reports of hazing and will investigate and respond to those matters accordingly. The next slide really talks about where you can report any potential act of hazing. Of course, you can always report it to me, to my office, the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards. The phone number is listed on the screen, and a link to filling out a physical report where you type describe behaviors. You can even upload screenshots, videos, is also on the screen in the case that you want to use that. You can always, in any matter of safety, call Duke Police by dialing 911 or the number that's listed on the screen. And then the university actually has a hazing hotline. And in any three of these reporting mechanisms, whether it's through our office in the Student Conduct and Community Standards, Duke Police, or the hazing hotline, you can request to be anonymous. And we just want to let you know that if you submit those reports anonymously, we may be limited in our ability to follow up and investigate. But we wanted to make sure that you all as incoming students are aware of the resources that are available to you and the university having a zero tolerance policy on hazing. Some students need examples of what hazing really is. If you're being asked to be blindfolded, to march in a line, required road trips, if you're being asked to wear clothes that are not appropriate for the weather, so shorts and tanks in the winter or heavy coats in the summer, if there are pledge books or signature books if you've been asked to be a designated driver for a group of students going to bars, personal servitude, which is basically running personal errands for individuals that are a part of a group, sleep deprivation. So if you were being asked to stay awake for long periods of time, or if your sleep pattern is being interrupted so frequently that you are not getting sleep, that could be a form of hazing. Acts that disrupt academic learning. So if you're being asked to skip class as a result of membership with this group or affiliation with this group, branding, paddling, all of those things can be defined as hazing. So please keep that in mind, and please keep the resources on the screen in mind. The next slide, also a very serious topic that the university takes seriously. And we wanted to take some time to define harassment and what it means to create unwelcoming environments. And so really briefly, unwelcome conduct that is based on a protected status that is severe, persistent, and pervasive, so much that it significantly interferes with your ability to be educated here at Duke or employed here at Duke or participate in a program or activity. If it creates that hostile environment that a reasonable person would find hostile, intimidating, or abusive, that is what we would consider harassment. In some cases, the behavior that you might see or observe might have been considered in your high school bullying, but it is not severe, persistent, or pervasive such that it's harassment. And so a lot of times we have to explain for students that bullying and harassment, there may be some overlap there, but a lot of times the way harassment is defined is different. There's a higher threshold. And if you are ever the subject of harassment or impacted by harassment, you can report that to the Office of Institutional Equity, whether it's on the basis of your sex, race, any of those protected statuses, you can report that. And then there's creating unwelcoming environments in the residence halls. That might include being so obnoxiously loud or targeting your loud behavior or problematic behavior to a certain room where certain people are. I think of all the examples of folks who bang on doors and then run and hide. If we find that you're targeting that person and that behavior is so severe, persistent, and pervasive that it creates a hostile living environment, that could be a violation of the university's policy on prohibited discrimination, harassment, and related misconduct. So we really take these things seriously. A lot of times where we see blurry lines here is sometimes with our students who may not have all the social cues of a neurotypical person. And so one thing we try to keep in mind is that we do have a campus that has all types of students, and neurodivergence is included. And where social cues might be limited, reports of harassment might increase. And so we also want to take a moment to define that bullying and harassment can be different and can be overlapping, but also just weird behavior, creepy behavior, right? Can be uncomfortable, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's harassment. And so if you run into that awkward person that's just awkward, that doesn't necessarily mean it should result in a report of harassment, discrimination, or related misconduct. But if you ever have questions, feel free to report it to our office, to the Office of Institutional Equity, and we're happy to work through that with you. Does that make sense? Okay, next slide. Want to take a moment to acknowledge this next slide covers a sensitive topic area. And I want to encourage you all that may be impacted by this topic to take what time you need to in this moment. If you need to step away and come back when we're finished discussing this, that's fine. But just wanted to give that trigger warning for a very sensitive topic for many folks. So sexual misconduct is something that is seen on college campuses nationwide. Duke has a very specific definition of sexual misconduct, and Duke is very attentive to reports of this nature, meaning that we review those reports thoroughly, we investigate those matters where appropriate, and we respond to those matters where appropriate. And so I want to take a moment here to make that clear for you all in terms of your sense of safety and your sense of trust with Duke regarding response to allegations of this nature. Sexual misconduct refers to sexual or gender-based harassment, sexual or gender violence, sexual exploitation, relationship violence, domestic violence and dating violence, and or sex or gender-based stalking. These behaviors are more clearly defined in Duke's policy on prohibited discrimination, harassment, and related misconduct, or we call it PPDHRM. I can almost promise you that you in your student groups are probably not going to be mentioning the PPDHRM, but you might hear words like sexual misconduct, sexual assault, rape, those words. When you hear those words, you can always report it again to the Office of Institutional Equity. There's a link that is on the bottom of the screen, and hopefully we can put that in the chat so that you all can see an infographic of resource offices on Duke's campus to contact if you are impacted by sexual misconduct, whether it's you are the person that has experienced it or you are the person that may be alleged to have committed it. And so we want you to be aware of the resources available to you.
Very briefly, talk a little bit about quiet and courtesy hours. So in the residence halls, our quiet hours are 24 hours a day. And so what that typically means is that community members should not hear your noise from more than 3 doors down. So if you're thinking about bringing your new JBL or Bose super bass speakers, probably leave those at home, please and thank you. But a part of this also is that if others in your community are asking you to turn the noise down, you must do so, right? Especially in the later hours when people are trying to sleep, trying to study, right? Again, that goes a part of wanting folks to be as comfortable as possible. It's a general rule of thumb, your noise, your music, your TV, your general noise should not be heard for more than 3 doors down. During finals periods, we sort of limit that scope. And so around finals period and late hours, your noise should also not be heard for more than 1 door down. So your RAs will talk a little bit more about what quiet hours means. But, it's just a general rule of thumb. We want you to be able to have fun and have play music and have friends over. We just want you to be able to do so while also not infringing on the comfort or the other individuals' ability to sleep or study or also socialize with their friends at the same time. And then also, you probably have already seen this list on our housing website as well as from your residence coordinators. But just again, these are just a list of some of our prohibited items. So these are items that are not allowed at all in the residence halls, and some of them not even on campus. Biggest topic is weaponry. So especially any type of gun, stun guns, tasers, martial art weapons, swords, even swords for decoration, and different knives like hunting knives, butterflies, and switchblades. You are permitted regular cooking knives and things like butter knives for like eating dinner and stuff like that. But they should also be very mindful of how big and the length of those knives at the same time. Things like we talked a little bit about fire safety, so things like hover plates, candles, halogen lamps, hoverboards, all items that are known to spontaneously or intentionally combust or create fires. Candles, again, I'd like to emphasize that again. That's why I put it on here twice. LED light strips is a new thing, mainly because they create a lot of damage to the walls. So, and we see that a lot where students have these LED strip lights and they put them all over their room. But the LED strip lights, they're hard. You're not able to take those off without ripping off paint and sheetrock. So that is now a banned item. Water bed. So I don't know who has a water bed these days, but if you have one, leave it at home. Personally own air conditioning and heating units. That is primarily because all of the residence halls have either a window air conditioning unit or a central air conditioning unit or radiator or central heating. We want folks to leave those at home because if everyone brought their air conditioning unit or a heating unit, it can create a power overload for the building and there'll be a power outage. So we want to make sure you leave that at home. Leave your pets at home unless they are approved accommodation through Student Disability and Accessibility Office. So unless it's an emotional support or a service animal or a pet that is approved through the SDA office, you must leave that at home. Fish are allowed within 25-gallon tanks or less. And it has to be non-predatorial, non-aggressive fish. So nothing like piranhas or stingrays. We talked a little bit about, and we also talked about alcohol-related paraphernalia as well as cannabis and that other paraphernalia as well.
So what happens if a student violates the Duke Community Standard? Number one, you're probably going to be documented in an incident report. It can be a Duke Police report, it could be a faculty report or staff report, or a housing and residence life report. When you're documented in that report, the report is sent to the Office of Student Conduct. We review it and determine next steps. If the report indicates that there might have been a policy violation, you're typically going to receive an email. That email is going to notify you that, hey, we believe you might have been involved in this incident. Can you have a meeting with us? And that meeting is typically called an administrative hearing. The administrative hearing is a meeting where you meet with a staff member at Duke to tell your side of the story of the alleged incident. So we're never going to make a decision about your conduct record without hearing your side of the story. And that administrative hearing is your opportunity to share your side of the story. After that hearing, you're going to receive another email that tells you the final outcome about whether or not we think you are responsible or not responsible for violating the code of conduct. Once you get that decision letter with the final outcome, you can choose to appeal that case by requesting a conduct board. A conduct board isn't just one person, it's actually a panel of people. It could be faculty members, students, staff, and they make a completely new decision on the case that can be better or worse than what your previous administrative hearing officer decided. And so this is the typical conduct process for when students violate the Duke Community Standard. We just wanted to take a moment to share with you that once you have gone through a conduct process, we have policies about whether or not we report that information out. One thing I want to note is that our office keeps all matters related to your conduct confidential unless we are subpoenaed by the court of law and unless you give us express permission to share that information. And so we will only report out what you give us permission to share or what the court has told us that we have to share. There are cases where on campus we share information with other offices because there may be a legitimate need for that office to know about it. But essentially, we can only report out disciplinary history that is disciplinary probation or greater. And so students, after meeting with our office, can receive admonition, which is like an informal warning. They can receive a reprimand, which is like a formal warning, and they can receive disciplinary probation, which is a status you are in the conduct office that says your conduct status is elevated. We're taking your behavior and your decisions very seriously, and we're watching it over this period of time. Students can also receive suspension and expulsion. And our reporting policy basically shares that we only report out disciplinary probation or greater, okay? And we only report disciplinary probation while you're a student. After you graduate, we don't report disciplinary probation unless it's suspension or expulsion, which is kept on your record indefinitely and reported indefinitely on your transcript and in your conduct record.
So to wrap up, we want to talk about, as you think about arriving to campus, some tips for also staying safe in terms of your personal safety, the safety of others. One thing to note is that our Duke University police officers, you'll see the acronym DUPD, these are fully commissioned officers by the state of North Carolina and have full arrest power. I know some campuses may have their specific campus security firms. Duke is not one of those, and so you must obey you must obey the lawful directions of DUPD officers, just as if you were like the North Carolina State Trooper, Durham Police, etc. Throughout campus, there are blue light phones that are there for your safety. We know that most folks have cell phones, but just in case your cell phone is dead or you need that assistance, there are blue lights spread throughout both East Campus, West Campus, and near the academic buildings. One thing that is very critical for your safety as you join us in the residence halls, do not prop open doors, especially the exterior doors of the residence halls. Remember that Duke University is adjacent to private neighborhoods. And so we never want to create a situation in which folks that aren't affiliated with the university are able to get into the halls. The buildings are secured and locked 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 364 days a year, because we unlock them for move-in, so y'all can easily move in, right? But after move-in, we lock those bad boys up. So make sure that you don't prop these doors open, so that way only the students and the staff and the faculty who are supposed to be in the building are able to get into the building. Another part of that is making, sometimes I also know that it's awkward when, someone's coming up behind you and as you're swiping in. If you don't recognize someone who is following you into the building, don't let them in, right? And feel free, sometimes it's a matter of, sometimes I'd rather you be rude and close the door on somebody's face than let someone in and it jeopardize folks' safety. So please make sure you don't prop open doors. Make sure that you are being mindful of who you let in. Dean Latasha talked a little bit about contacting DUPD and also 911 as well. We also encourage you, when you and your roommate are not in the room, lock your door. It is very, it takes it could take as little as 4 seconds for someone to literally go in to your unlocked room, snatch your laptop or your iPhone or some high value item and walk back out. So make sure that even if you're just walking down to the hall to the bathroom, you're next door visiting a friend, if there's no one in your space and both you and your roommate are not going to be in a room, even however temporarily, make sure you lock your door. Walk with others as much as especially in the evenings, if possible, just safety in numbers. Make use of our safety systems, the Live Safe app, use the bus transportation system. If you notice that if you or someone in your community is sick or injured, call DUPD, call EMS. Your RA can also help with that process, especially if you need to remain with somebody. We talked about always evacuating whenever you hear a fire alarm go off as well. And then also make sure that as you get ready to come to campus, sign up for Duke Alert. This is a text message, email, outdoor system that alerts to critical campus emergencies. That could be anything related to an active shooter, to weather emergencies. But this Duke alert system will alert you in the event of a campus-wide emergency in which you'll need to be able to take immediate action. So make sure you sign up for Duke alerts when you arrive here on campus so you can receive those timely warnings. So and so overall, as a community, we just want to make sure that you, as Dean Latasha mentioned, that you all are all members of the community, right? And so your behavior can impact others as well as here at Duke, others at Duke, whether positive or negatively. Also thinking about the fact that we are a learning community, and so we strive to create an environment where students learn and grow from their mistakes, not if they happen, but when they happen, right? You're all going to make some mistake, whether it's a conduct mistake, an academic mistake, or an interpersonal mistake. We want to create an environment that provides everyone the space to learn and grow from those mistakes when they happen. And then also, again, all students have the responsibility to help create a welcoming climate that is based in honesty, fairness, respect, and accountability at Duke University. So I don't know how much time we have, but Dean Latasha and I are open to questions. But here's also some of our contact information at the same time if you have questions that you may not want to ask in this space, but you want to follow up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brandon and Latasha. So yeah, we have just a couple more minutes, and we do have a few questions, and y'all again answered a lot that came in presently on the slide. But Brandon, you talked about the LED strip lights. Is there a difference between string lights? Are those allowed, or does that fall into the same category?
As of right now, string lights are permitted, primarily because you would have to normally put string lights up using like a thumbtack or command strips. The reason why the LED strip lights are not permitted anymore is because the adhesive that they use on the back of those strips, when you take them off, it literally tears up the walls. But those string lights are permitted.
And so, is there a procedure if, say, myself and my roommate, or my roommate gets sick or I get sick? Is there a procedure, anything in place to protect the other party that may not be sick in a room?
I can talk a little bit about sort of our procedure, but then perhaps Latasha can talk a little bit about I think it's called the medical amnesty policy. And actually, I'll let Latasha, are you prepared to talk a little bit about that, Ashley?
Not the medical amnesty policy. We have an amnesty policy for alcohol, and it really is a policy that's supposed to be about saving lives. And so if your roommate, for example, has fallen sick because of alcohol poisoning, or they're unconscious because of alcohol, we really want to create a culture of bystander intervention, of stepping in and calling an RA or calling the police to get help to that person who is medically despondent for whatever reason. And in those cases, if you were drinking or if that person was drinking, our office would provide amnesty, which is basically like a freebie, another freebie, for engaging in that type of policy violation if it resulted in you actually helping save a life. The other thought that I had, Brandon, as this question was phrased, is thinking about public health concerns. And what I can share with you is if there is another public health concern, such as the COVID pandemic, the university has already developed a response to those matters, and there would be criteria or expectations that we would send out to the campus and would be considered enforceable policy. And so I would share with you that if there are other public health concerns and the university is communicating expectations, please make sure that you are compliant with those expectations so that it doesn't result in a referral to the conduct office. Now, managing colds, for example, or other things that might be contagious in your space, is something that we encourage you to talk with your roommate directly about, and see what support might be available to you by connecting with an RA or with an RC. And I don't want to forget talking about our wellness center on campus and student health services. And so if there's concern that you might be sick or your roommate might be sick, potentially talking first to your roommate. And if you can't resolve that concern there, talk with your RA and RC and or student health services for what support can be offered for that. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Brandon, to that.
That was great.
Okay.
And Tasha, if you can speak to this point. So does a conduct report overlap with a legal report? So the student actually gave an example. Would a student underage drinking get reported to police, and could they receive a minor in possession?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And one thing we try to share with students is that a conduct report in process is separate and different than a legal report or a court of law. And so what we decide in the conduct process is different than what a court of law would decide, or a law enforcement agency outside of Duke University PD. And so I want to make that clear, because you will often be environments as students that are outside of Duke, and we have no control over what Durham police report, or what the county sheriff officers report, or what the state police report. And so your behavior in those environments, as it relates to law and city and county policies, is something that you would have to address on your own, or with the support of your parents, or with student legal aid, so on and so forth. But a conduct report is different than a legal report. And I can share with you that our Duke University Police Department, so the police department that works specifically on Duke's campus, works closely with the conduct office. And so things that they respond to as it relates to underage drinking and low-level drug behavior like cannabis, we manage in-house. And so they don't necessarily report that to the courts. Does that make sense? But that is specific to Duke University students when Duke University Police is responding, and it's typically for low-level behavior like alcohol or cannabis. Once you get into the several schedules of narcotics, once you get into dealing drugs and distributing drugs, those are considered egregious violations of the university policy and of the law. And that can result in a legal report in a court or criminal system. The takeaways here is that criminal court process is different than the conduct process. Most of what happens on Duke campuses falls under DUPD. DUPD share with the conduct office low-level reports, and they may share with the courts or higher up those more egregious violations of law.
Thanks for that answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so to wrap this up, again, great content, great information. What is one big takeaway that you would want for all of our new to Duke students that are here on this call, watching this live? What is the one thing that you want them to take away for our wrap up?
I think for me, it's ask questions to guarantee your safety and your well-being here at Duke. I know that sometimes, the policies can be sometimes can be confusing. And it's like, is this against the policy? Is it not? Is that compliance or not? What happens to this? Proactively ask us questions, because we just want to make sure that you have the information that you need to make the best decisions possible that influence your time here. So don't hesitate to reach out to any office, us in Housing and Residence Life, Conduct, and ask questions.
Yeah. That's a great point. ask questions, be informed. And I am going to leave this one pointer, something I mentioned earlier. There'll be 2 pointers. One is that this is a community, and we all have a shared responsibility for ourselves and our behavior and for others. And so nothing you do is in isolation. Each decision you make in your behavior has a ripple effect for the folks that are around you, whether it's your roommate, whether it's the RA, whether it's Duke Police that's responding to an incident, or whether it's me and my staff in my office that have to meet with you to talk about things. This is all happening within a community. And so we want you to think about that impact to the community, and then think about that community as a source of support. And so if there are ever moments where you feel like you need help, where you're in crisis, let your roommate know, let your RA know, let Duke Police know, let me know, let my staff know, so that we could be a support. That's one. The other thing I want to reemphasize is making the commitment before you go out, before you go party, about what you will and will not do. That applies to drinking. It applies to healthy sexual relationships, right? Making a commitment to you and your partner about what will and will not happen. Because again, research shows that if you take the time to have the conversation with yourself, with your roommate, with your girls, with your guys before you go out, that I'm only drinking 1 drink tonight, or I am only going to bring this can. I'm not going to take an open cup from another person and I can't see what was in the cup. I'm not going to do that. Or I'm always going to stay with you tonight. You're going to be my buddy. We're going to text each other to check in before we leave. We're going to do that. So setting those commitments before you go out, always have that pre-game game plan, right? So that you can be prepared for the social environments that you may be in. I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brandon and Latasha, for sharing all of this great information. And thank you to all of you that joined us today, and those of you that are going to watch this live. Just some quick reminders that, again, this is recorded. And so we're going to get this transcribed and accessible to all, and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel in about 72 hours. And then we have our last set of Summer Transition Series webinars next week. On Wednesday, we have our first year move-in information webinar at 6 o'clock. And then for our transfer students, we have that session at 7 o'clock. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And of course, if you have any questions, contact informations are on the screen, or check out the Blue Book, or check out the respective websites. We are here to all assist you and make sure that your transition here to Duke is as successful as possible, and you will be here before you know it. So again, thanks for joining us this evening, and you all have an amazing rest of your day.
See you soon.
Bye, you all. See you in a couple weeks.